This film is not just about the immediate problems facing Lake Sevan. Such problems are usually discussed every time the lake is on the verge of ecological disaster. This film aims to present the broader criminal activities against nature, concurrent with the inaction which will one day surely destroy the lake if the same management, misguided by the ongoing lack of logic, continues. Lake Sevan and its surrounding area are state properties not subject to alienation. Any activity related to the lake and its territory is regulated in accordance with procedures established by the government. However, no government of the Republic of Armenia has ever defined the significance of Lake Sevan. The question remains unanswered and thus unclassified. What is Sevan? A freshwater reservoir, an irrigation reservoir, a strategic fish nursery, a source of electricity, or simply a recreation area? Without clarifying the strategic meaning and importance of Lake Sevan, all actions taken will have a chaotic and fragmentary nature. As surprising as it may be, to this day, we are still guided by the standards set for fish-inhabited waters by the Soviet Union. However, today there is neither the quality of water nor the stock of fish such as it was during Soviet times. Ultimately, we are sailing the surface without understanding the destination.
The
current state of the lake is a consequence of poor management. The eutrophication of the lake is flourishing. All of it is a response of the lake and the ecosystem to the poor management and our attitude towards the lake. According to our evaluation, the longer we delay, the less likely we are to save the lake. And it will reach a point where those measures will no longer be able to save it.
The opinion of science is not taken into consideration. Policymakers are far from science and knowledge. This is the main issue here.
Since 1990, no government has updated the water quality standards of Lake Sevan, when defining those standards is a fundamental part of proper management. The quality standards of lakes inside the modern European Union are 10 times stricter than those actually functioning for Sevan. With the norms subject to an immediate revision, we still have the possibility of ruthlessly polluting the lake. For example, in the case of phosphorus and nitrate, which are considered destructive agents to Sevan, the possibility of further pollution is from 43 to 500 times, while today the actual condition of the lake clearly proves the opposite. Not updating the unreformed Soviet norms in accordance with the current biochemical state of the lake is a form of corruption that ensures former and current rulers against any responsibility. Regardless of the classification and significance of Sevan, it is important to perceive it as an ecosystem that, like a living organism, responds to all dangerous interventions and to incompetent management. Sevan is a complex ecosystem with highly interconnected components. One of the most important components is the animal food chain. It is termed an inverted pyramid. At the bottom is phytoplankton, or algae, which have been covering the lake for 3 years in a row and emitting poisons. Second comes the zooplankton, then the crustaceans, and finally the fish. If the normal functioning of this pyramid is disturbed, that is, one type imbalances the other, then we have ecological problems.
During the last 3 years, the crab stock has decreased, and it decreased extensively. When there was crayfish in the lake, Sevan did not turn green because the crayfish ate all the algae. After that, Sevan began turning green because the algae were already growing. There is no chain to eliminate them.
Մեր կանխատեսումները
So far, our predictions have all come true. If you look at our reports from 10 years ago, when we predicted that the crayfish would find itself in the same condition as the whitefish and other fish species, when during that time there were people who were saying, there are a lot of crayfish, what are you evaluating? It won't be abolished. What are you talking about? But the day came when, in fact, the crayfish disappeared from the lake. Fish theft in Sevan has always amazed us. I'm not saying that the issue is not present in Russia, but in our country there is a struggle to fight that issue. I know people who suffered as a result of this. I know people who were arrested. There are few security guards, there's a social problem, but that is not a reason to kill nature. The state should take an active position on this issue. There's not even a hint of it in Sevan. Fish theft is very powerful. I was told about 1,200 brigades every day, the whole year. At dawn, the lake is covered with many fishing boats. All of us see that. Even if each fisherman catches 20-40 kilograms, imagine how much it is. Thousands of tons the whole year.
They
have created a perception that fishermen are bad guys, guys who do not love Sevan, who do not care about Sevan. To some extent, they have transformed us into puppets in their hands. They take the fish from Sevan, conserve and export it. Well, it's not beneficial for them to buy the fish at a higher price. It's some kind of a fish nursery mafia. Our former officials who have fish farms always try to keep the fish price low. They constantly work on that. The role of the state is to raise the price of the fish. And if the price of the fish rises, we will start catching less fish. For me, a beneficial scheme is the following. When I enter the sea, I catch, for instance, 30 pieces a day. That would be 15,000 Armenian dram, 5,000 of which would be spent on gas and petrol. And the remaining 10,000 Armenian dram would be divided between me and the other fishermen. They steal whitefish and sell it for 100 or 200 dirhams, but it is considered a very expensive fish in the world. It's called a whitefish. 1 kilogram should not cost less than $10. But in our country, they even grind and give it to pigs or to the artificial salmon, which is of a lower level because it's an artificial fish. Regardless of their species, all over the world, artificially grown fish are several times cheaper than fish raised on natural food, especially expensive whitefish. How's it even possible for a small scientific center like ours that does not have any enforcement mechanism or an authorization to carry out inspections, by studying the diet of people, is able to clarify and discover that, for example, the whitefish is used during season when there is a prohibition to use it. We are able to see that there is a trade in the street, that the fish is being sold. In all these cases, our center sounds the alarm, appeals to the media, makes our voices heard, and, by contrast, with this exaggerated state apparatus, has no state body been able to carry out this control? And after such an arbitrary mission, the whole team around the world that was responsible for such a crime should, at least, leave their positions and go home.
Սրանք 300 դրամով։
Հա։
Սրանք 500 հատը։
Բայց իսկ քանակի եթե 200 կիլոյով շաբաթը վեգալեմ,
Ներկա դերցամ խնդիր չկա։ Չնայած էլի, եթե սորտ ծրածա պետք, խնդիր չկա։
այսինքն պատվադից չեք անի։
Միֆը դա այն է, որ այստեղ պետք է անպայման ձկնորսություն լինի արդյունաբերական, որովհետև կա մարդկանց սոցիալական.
The myth is that there must be industrial fishing here because there's a large social stratum of people who have no other way to live and earn an income. This is an obvious lie because I can't say for this year, but last year the stock of fish in Sevan was 700 tons and 500 tons in the previous year. On the coast, the fish is sold for 100 Armenian dirhams. That means 1 kilogram whitefish costs 300 Armenian dirhams. If we count those 500 tons, it turns out that we are talking about $500,000. Those 500,000 can always be provided from the budget to those really vulnerable groups in order to compensate for some time, but in reality, fish theft is a huge industry. Even right now, the offshore shops are selling conserved whitefish. Whitefish is being sold on a number of streets in Yerevan. And the price can be several times higher than the price at which fishermen sell it, up to 10 times more expensive. This is not a social issue. It is definitely concealed work, as a result of which several groups in Armenia receive super profit and get rich.
Ուղղակի գեր շահույթներ են ստանում եւ հարստանում։
The change in the size of the fish stock of Sevan has always been uncontrollable. Whitefish stocks in the 90s amounted to 13 to 20,000 tons. In 2005, 500 tons. In 2010, 50 tons. And in 2020, 700 tons. The drastic changes in the actual unmanaged population of the fish directly reflect the periodic disturbances of the ecosystem, which, in their turn, are one of the reasons for the blossoming of blue-green algae.
We still do not have any data showing that the condition of Sevan is improving. On the contrary, we are more likely to encounter parts of the lake that are becoming waterlogged. Now we are standing near the location where waters from Arpa reach. Here, decay processes begin, contributing to the growth of blue-green algae. Based on the photos taken from space, we understand that everything starts from here. Our research today definitely speaks to the detriment of Sevan.
All the lakes in the world are classified according to their ecological age. A young lake is called oligotrophic. Such lakes are located in high mountainous areas. The water temperature is low, populated with many fish stocks, and with a low amount of biogenic substances, nitrogen, phosphorus. The water is transparent and bluish. Hypertrophy is a process during which the lake receives additional nutrients, due to which the ecosystem and living organisms of the lake experience changes. The second class is the mesotrophic lakes, where the water temperature is already high, the food chain is often disrupted, and the number of flora is 60% higher than in oligotrophic lakes. Finally, we have the eutrophic lakes, where algae blooms become more frequent. The water is turbid and more green. Today's Sevan is in a state typical of mesotrophic and eutrophic lakes. There are already signs of regular swamp formation. The flora and fauna have changed, but everything's not lost yet. One of the lakes in the world that was heading toward ecological disaster but later rescued is Annecy Lake in France. Our choice of comparison is not random. There are about 230,000 people living in the surroundings of this lake, as many as there are in the neighborhood of Sevan. It is noteworthy that the amount of water in Lake Annecy is 1,200,000,000 cubic meters, which is 31 times less than the amount of water in Lake Sevan. To better understand the difference in sizes between Lake Annecy and Lake Sevan, let us say that from the surface of Lake Sevan, the wind annually evaporates as much water as there is in Lake Annecy altogether. In 1946, as a result of the harmful activities of humans, Annecy quickly began swamping. The quantity of sewage, waste, and garbage meets that of what is happening in Lake Sevan today.
Cette problématique de l'eutrophisation, c'est-à-dire
In the middle of the previous century, scientists, researchers, professional fishermen, and divers sounded the alarm regarding the eutrophication of Lake Annecy. At first, this act was perceived with suspicion. Everyone thought that the lake was so big that we cannot pollute it. But it turns out that we were able to do that.
70 years ago, after the Second World War, not much was understood in Europe about the eutrophication of the lake, but with the joint efforts of several sympathetic scientists, residents, and the state, by 1957 already, an organization called SILA was established, which united all the communities surrounding the lake under the slogan, "Annecy is a clean lake." Sewage release systems were built, involving all the interested parties in the lake. From fishermen to scientists, taking into account their interests, which ultimately led to smart management and recovery of the lake.
Such problems develop rapidly. At first, the green algae are very few and harmless, but they quickly turn into cyanobacteria and start producing toxins. Do you know how politics work in practice? At this moment, your only objective is the following. You need to be able to inform your people about these problems. If the people are not fully convinced and do not understand those issues, then the politicians will do nothing.
Sevan also received its first ecological stroke in the middle of the last century, when Soviet Armenia needed new capacities to develop the industry. The cascade of Sevan hydroelectric power stations was built, due to which by the 1950s, the level of Lake Sevan had dropped by about 18 meters, losing about 37% of the previous volume of water. The lake's ecosystem reacted negatively to the sharp drop in water levels. 14 years later, in 1964, the first blooms of blue-green algae were observed. It was typical of Soviet Armenia to hide the causes and consequences of the ecological catastrophe. In the 1970s, Pavel was a scientist studying Lake Sevan.
В 1974 году уже в Севане было довольно сильное цветение.
By 1974, Sevan already had full blooming of blue-green algae.
В 1976 году
I clearly remember in 1976 on the shore of Lejashin, the wave was pushing out foam with a height of 2 meters. If you enter that foam, it would definitely cover you. The length was at least 10 meters. In the same year, massive decline in whitefish was observed. A large number of dead fish were thrown out on the opposite shore of Lejashin. We were collecting those fish and burning them. Dead fish were spotted all over the area of the lake. Based on my personal calculations, taking into account the fish on the shore and on the surface, I can say that 15,000 tons of fish were dropped.
около 15 тысяч тонн.
Sevan's problems were somewhat resolved only after Nikita Khrushchev's visit to Armenia, when he was persuaded to sign the expensive Arpas-Sevan tunnel project. Since 1981, it has been possible to supply additional water to the swamping Sevan as a temporary solution to its problems. Lake Baikal, which has an area almost equal to the territory of Armenia, also has had problems with algae since 2013.
Бизнес и власть не сильно нас слышали.
Neither the business nor the authorities listened to us. We must bow to the local people, the people of Severobaykalsk, who noticed these massive flourishes and did not stay indifferent. The movement was organized by teachers jointly with local ecologists. They applied to our institute, to the general public, and tried to clean the shores on their own. They even applied to the prosecutor's office.
Это было место, пляж, где они всегда купались. И тут раз.
In Russia, as well as in Armenia, there is no culture of carrying out serious research. According to Russian scientists, no necessary research has been carried out in Baikal yet.
We have felt safe and careless because we have lived on the shores of pure and clean lakes for a long time. My superior was always surprised with me, saying, "Why do you need Baikal? It is a cold lake, there will never be a problem with bacteria." But the sewage and temperature change did their harm to Lake Baikal. Now we need expensive equipment, laboratories, and of course, round-the-clock monitoring, which must comply with the accepted standards.
я уже живу и работаю.
Throughout my life and career, an in-depth, proper, and necessary research of Baikal has not been done yet.
Более того, даже поддержки никакой.
Moreover, there is no state support to raise and solve these issues.
French scientists are the ones whose research is able to dictate to governments the sequence of correct steps. For instance, 40 years ago, they managed to completely ban the import of washing powders that contain phosphates. Today, ANSI has evidently recovered as a result of that. Based on their research, scientists determine the policy on Lake Ansi.
La qualité écologique du lac et des possibles changements au cours du temps.
If, for example, the oxygen concentration in the lake decreases, we can require the management to create conditions for the necessary oxygen level to be balanced in the water. In any case, it's the people's idea to clean and restore the lake.
Le reste de l'édifice trophique et les nutriments peuvent avoir aussi des conséquences qui peuvent remonter jusqu'aux poissons. C'est pour ça que nous devons suivre l'ensemble de ces compartiments.
The concerns of Armenian scientists, as a rule, remain neglected and have an advisory nature for the governments, while the flowering of algae of the last 3 years contains significant dangers.
You can see and register the situation for yourself. This is the Hairivank observation point. Here, we have measured dissolved oxygen, which has dropped increasingly. And if the average is 6 to 8, then here we have recorded 0.4 to 0.5 milligrams per liter, which is extremely low quantities. And this is one of the dangers that experts always mention as the main result of flowering. Why? Because the disturbance of the oxygen regime has a very bad impact on the ecosystem.
We carried out chemical analysis of cyanobacterial secondary metabolites and found about 10 different groups of metabolites, among which was a microcystin, known to be quite toxic for both human health and aquatic organisms. It may cause neurotoxicological, cytotoxicological, skin, liver, or kidney problems for humans. In the case of lake eutrophication, fish are also under attack, as fish and hydrobion, and as food for humans. Toxins accumulate in the body of a fish, and later, when a person eats the fish, it enters the human body and affects the person. In the same way, when the cultivated plant is irrigated with the same water, it enters the plant and affects it. And when a human uses this cultivated plant as a food, those toxins enter the human body.
For 10 years now, the French people have been able to not only neutralize dangerous algae from Lake Ansi, but also to turn that process into profit.
We are among the first ones who were able to create a mug factory. And by this, I mean a factory for the methanation of residues left as a result of water purification. Bacteria produce methane and other forms of gases. We clean it up and get 97% pure methane, which we then sell to the residents of 1,500 adjacent apartments, or 90 buses. Later, we invest the income in building new quality treatment plants. That is why we do not reduce the price of water.
In Armenia, the monitoring of Lake Sevan is not carried out throughout the year, but rather 2 or 3 times a year due to limited funding. This is all the Ministry of Environment does for the assessment of the water quality of Lake Sevan. No analysis, evaluation, or forecast is made, while monitoring data is created for these 3 purposes. The best evidence of the lack of analysis and forecasting is the fact that the state does not fund those processes at all. The lack of proper scientific, economic, and sociological research in Sevan nullifies all efforts toward rehabilitating the lake.
Что финансирование армянской науки, что финансирование нашей науки.
Funding for both Armenian and Russian science allows us to take just a few photos. Just imagine, you were born, and I take one photo of you after your birth, then on your 50th birthday, and later when you are 90 years old. It's very possible that I may not even recognize you. I may not be able to juxtapose the person in the 3 photos. And if we took those photos every year, we would understand how people lived and how they changed over the years. Now, we take photos in the spring, then, God willing, in the fall, if the government has money to spare, which is why we cannot predict anything clearly.
Hence, վիճակը սրվում է.
As soon as the situation worsens and the ecological state visually deteriorates, they start giving different assignments saying, write an analysis, bring an analysis, hold various press conferences, interviews, etc. This is not how it should be. There should be an institute of analysis based on clear monitoring data. We don't have that institute. That is, in fact, at the moment, there is no scientifically grounded definitive information about what is happening in the lake. What will happen tomorrow? There's no forecast. Well, if you do not know what is going on, you cannot make a scientific prediction. What are you managing? How do you manage it? A clear institute of responsibility must be defined. The authors of the current situation must be held accountable, and the management system and decision-making mechanism must be changed in such a way that specific people, specific structures hold full responsibility for their steps, actions, and the consequences of those actions. Without this, we will continue having the same picture, and in a few years, we will have a full swamp here.
What happened in Armenia was not a revolution. There was a change in government, but the same semi-literate people remained in power. This is the problem. There is a need to implement the so-called vetting in all state bodies because a lot of non-specialists, people who are just killing time, are sitting there doing nothing.
For me, it is more important to try to involve the society in the process, to ensure transparency for the society in terms of the work that the government and its respective subdivisions are doing. Because when there's transparency, the manager starts actually working, and they see that the results of their work are visible to the people, from ordinary citizens to independent specialists. And those managers will try to work properly because they are visible.
The flowering of Sevan, of course, is also stimulated by the hundreds of hectares of wooded areas that remained underwater. There is no exact information on how many such areas there are and what direct damage they cause to the lake.
One of the most important negative effects of the flowering process is the organic matter that passes into the water through the trees and the humus layer under it. Here the humus layer of the soil is clearly visible, which is washed away and passes into the lake. The problem is quite serious. The Vardini zone is one of those examples where, in terms of volume, the areas that have been left underwater are quite visible. It is difficult for me to say how to clean them in the upcoming years because a rather technically difficult process is expected.
Sevan is the last destination for the sewages of the lake's coastal communities. At least 75% of sewage is discharged into rivers untreated. To show the state attitude toward water purification in a vivid example, one only needs to know the location of the public beach of Martuni. It was built 100 meters away from the sewage point of the city pouring into Lake Sevan. Deviations from the current norms of sewage in large settlements are the following. Gavar 173%, Martuni 270%, Vartanis 600%.
When one flushes the toilet, Sevan is dirty, that's for sure, 100%. The process by which the water turns turquoise, the cyanobacteria, have a period of flowering. 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 5 weeks later, they die due to the temperature, decay, and a special chemical reaction occurs. Then they produce calcium with a blue pigment. It is this blue pigment that gives this turquoise effect to the lake. If you go into the water, we did that. White flakes fall like snow. Every single one of them goes down and sits on the floor. The sediment under that water does not mean that the water has been purified. It just means that the process is over and it will bloom again.
Ironically, another French company, Veolia Water, is responsible for the disposal of wastewater in Armenia and does not even consider the introduction of biological water treatment plants.
There's no article in the contract signed with the Armenian government where they are obliged to install biological treatment plants. And all of our attempts to cooperate with Veolia Water or to force them are useless. They do not even agree to build a small pilot station here with our financial means. Armenia's interests collide with the interests of Veolia Water. Veolia Water clearly tells us, it is in the letters, the treatment plants are additional costs for us that we do not anticipate, as simple as that.
According to the calculations of the Armenian experts, the cost of installing and handling biological treatment plants in large communities near Lake Sevan is only a few million euros. Compared to the 400 million euros of the Lake Ansi treatment plant, these are just pennies. Alan has lived all his life on the shores of Lake Ansi. The drinking and irrigation systems of his house are separate from the clear waters descending from the Alps to Lake Ansi.
Here I show you our collector. which collects sewage from all the houses and pushes them to the cleaning plants. And this water comes from the mountains. It is clean, passes through my territory and fills the lake. The mere fact that I am the owner does not give me the right to use this water. It is designed for the lake and is considered a public property. And it is strictly forbidden to put someone else's property in your home's irrigation or drinking water system. It is a great pleasure to be able to enjoy and make use of the lake, to be as free as I feel on a boat or on the shore, especially since the lake is well preserved. Such feelings cannot be measured in numbers. We cannot say that boat taxes are too high. If we love nature, it is priceless.
It has been 8 months since former fisherman Andronic stopped fishing and found his passion in the field of tourism, organizing various team buildings on the shore of Lake Sevan.
It was not that I was earning a lot of money by fishing. I realized that I can earn the same money elsewhere. I would like for all of the villages that are close to Lake Sevan to see this and do the same. I am sure that they will succeed. They can even be better than Drachtik. I'm more than sure that all of us should have one simple slogan: to live near the lake without harming it.
Since 2008, the water levels of Sevan have had to rise at least 27 centimeters annually. Over the years, the government has taken additional water intake under various pretexts, citing the conclusions of the Academy of Sciences Committee, which assured that there would be no reduction in the water level of the lake. Meanwhile, in fact, in 2012, 2014, 2017, and 2018, the level decreased, which directly violated the law on Sevan. By January 1st, 2020, the level of the lake should have been 1,901.5 meters. But in fact, the level of Sevan is 150 centimeters behind the rising schedule, which averages a cost of $7 million. What $7 million are we talking about? There is no lower value in Armenia than the water of Lake Sevan. 1 cubic meter of water is estimated at only 20 lumas. For comparison, it should be noted that 1 cubic meter of Lake Ansi water costs 3.8 euros. The difference is huge, 9,842 times more. But even in the case of a small 20 lumas, the loss of 150 centimeters costs $7 million. Not only is the water of Lake Sevan so devalued, but also the inhabitants of the settlements adjacent to the lake, whose problems are ignored. For example, hundreds of residents of the Karchakpur community have been fighting for decades to save their property from Sevan. Meanwhile, the press writes only about the coastal private houses of rich people as an obstacle to the rise of Sevan. The main residence of the owners of these private houses is not in the territory of Sevan, while the people of Karchakpur are struggling to save their main house from the lake. It is a paradox, but this village should have been underwater if the law on Sevan had been properly implemented.
We have 43 economies that are at big risk due to the possibility of increasing water levels of Sevan. 27 of them have the necessary documents, others don't, because during the construction, people apply the village community and many other places. And everyone promised, go and do your job, collect all the necessary documents, and as time passes by, everything will work out. In 2008, in the Republic of Armenia, a law on Sevan was adopted. With the adoption of this law, our rights have been violated. In order to build these ruins, I need to have legal permission. I need to get approval from the cadastre department to make any changes on this construction. It is prohibited by the law. This house is located at 1903, 1903.2 above the water level. It is not even 3.5. Obviously, it will remain underwater. I have 2 underage kids. I want to construct and create so that my children will have something as well. There was a garden here on approximately 1 hectare. Now, you see what happened as a result of humidity? All of it gradually dried out. It dried out due to the rising of Sevan water levels. And this year, pear trees are drying up. The house is located at 1903.5 above the water level. All of this is legal with documents. The 4th generation has been born here already. And now, starting from 2000 and something, Vladimir Movsisyan has decided that the water level of Sevan needs to be raised in order for the lake to be cleaned. And these are our potato pits. I bought the seeds and sowed the potatoes. Where should I keep this now?
I came here from Russia. This is my house. As in, it's my husband's house, my kid's house, my house. I have 3 kids. We have built this house a long time ago and decided to open a bakery here. They did not say anything. Last year, people from the ministry came here and we had a meeting. They did not say anything precise. No one says anything specific about compensation. There's no person who would say, yes, I'm willing to compensate for this territory. You have invested this amount of money in this territory and I'm willing to give you compensation. No one says anything, and we're living like this in total uncertainty. We're trying to make the ends meet till we see what happens next.
We have appealed to our new government as well. Once again, we got different unsatisfying answers. They don't care about us at all. They don't hear our voices. Here, to the Minister of Territorial Administration and Development, Mr. Suren Papikyan, to the Minister of Environment, Mr. Eric Grigoryan. Based on the instruction of the Prime Minister, please discuss and submit information. Deadline, 10 days. We received this letter on the 14th of October 2019. Their deadline was 10 days. To this day, there is no response. How should we perceive this? What should we do about this? We have a future. We have kids. What should we do? What should we construct so that we are successful? For how long should we wait and live in this uncertainty? I don't want much. My father struggled and created all of this. I created all of this. If they give me compensation, I will go and build myself a house in Chamerlu. It's our village. They cannot rescue Sevan this way, for sure. This is serious. It's drinking water. Let them first solve the issue with sewage throughout the territory of Sevan. Let them clean the territory that was left underwater. The water rises and comes forward. And what about what's left on the bottom? They should clean it first, and only then can they come and tell us to leave. Where should I go? They did not even do 10% of what they said and planned they would do. This is not how it should be. They cannot solve this problem with one old tractor. They are sitting in their offices trying to solve problems like, yes, we should clean Sevan this year. That's it. This is not how it should be. Let them come, and I will show them what they need to clean up. That's it.
The lake and the people can coexist in harmony if people respect the rules dictated by the lake. Just like a captain takes into account the direction of the wind and the strength of the waves while sailing. But as long as people try to dictate their rules to the lake, nature's response will not be belated.